When board games give us more, we're rolling with more. Today we're doing a review of Fantastic Factories Subterfuge. It's an expansion to Fantastic Factories. I'm Will, and with me is the corporate spy herself,
Sarah.
And Sarah, why don't you tell us about Fantastic Factories Subterfuge?
All right. So Subterfuge adds contractors that you can hire to steal resources, cards, or even dice, and a sabotage mechanic that disables opponents' factories. So what it contains are more blueprints, more contractors, and sabotage tokens.
Dun, dun, dun.
All right, Will, does this change the two-player experience?
Not really,
But it could.
but it could.
So, but here's the thing.
Well, it doesn't change it rules-wise,
Yeah.
really. Other than the fact that you have a sabotage token to deal with. Experience-wise, if these sabotage things come up, the impact on a two-player game is going to be felt a lot harsher than, say, a four-player game.
Right. So they're like, well, I want to back up a little bit and say when we played with Subterfuge, it was not just the base game and Subterfuge. So we probably should have tried it that way to feel the full strength of it. But we played with everything. And when I mean everything, we have like promo stuff, we have the other expansion, manufactions, and we have Subterfuge. So it creates a very large deck for both the blueprints and the contractors. We only saw a couple of the contractors and we only saw a couple of the blueprints from Subterfuge. One of the contractors was to steal 3 resources from opponents. So in a 2-player game, if one of us had actually done it, we would have been stealing 3 resources from the other person. But if you were playing in a more player game, like if you actually, I think this can go up to 5, right? I feel like it can.
I think one of the expansions might have added a 5th player board.
And I probably should have looked at that.
Yeah.
Let's say theoretically, we are not making this up. If you have at least, let's say you even play with 4 players.
Yeah.
If you steal 1 resource from, you know, 3 other people, it's not going to hit each individual person as bad as stealing 3 from 1 person. I guess is my point.
Right.
In a 2-player game, it could feel worse.
Although it could also feel worse in a 4-player game because now you have 3 people angry with you instead of just 1.
There is that too.
However, it doesn't seem to reliably pop up based on playing with everything.
Yes. If maybe you just played the base game with just Subterfuge, but even then, the base game has a large deck. And so it's really going to depend a lot on how fast you go through the contractors. Because like, if you watch our, base review video, I don't use the contractors. And that's where the meanest stuff is. I mean, there's some blueprints that have
Effects.
of other effects, but I found the few blueprints I had no player interaction to them that I remember, or if there was, it was not negative player interaction.
Part of the reason why is all the timing of the game, because when it comes to messing with your various blueprints that you've built, that's kind of the point of the game that lets you go off into your little corner. And if they have effects that happen and affect other people, the timing of that would be kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
So that's why most of the negative interactions happens with the contractors. And if you have a player that's disinclined to play with contractors, you don't see them much.
Right.
So that's, I think the intention of the game is kind of watered down.
It is. And so we do believe theoretically this could produce it will produce a meaner game than the base or manufactions expansion, assuming you actually actively play with the contractors, really honestly. If you don't in a 2-player game, it's really not going to come up.
Yeah.
So your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
But just want to put it out there that it could affect more negatively a 2-player experience.
Yes.
All right, for accessibility, the only thing that changed, because it only added more contractors and blueprints, was these sabotage tokens. They are blue background with white text and then orange background with white. The orange side's a little harder to read, but not terribly so I don't think most people are going to have problems with it.
Yeah, and I'm sensitive enough that I can feel one of these tokens and I can feel which side is pressed down and which side is flatter, because you always have a punch when it comes to the chipboard. So you can definitely feel one side feels different than the other.
Right.
That's pretty much how I tell
Right.
them apart.
He figures out what's the top, which is the smoother, rounder part, and the
Yes.
flat is the bottom then.
Unless they print it weird. But then I asked Sarah to start
That's
the
true.
game.
We identify it before we go start playing. So accessibility wise, that's really the only thing that changed. So going over our feelings about it, we talked a lot about it in the 2-player experience portion, but I will say for me, I don't like negative player interaction in an engine building game. I've said that in the base review and I think the expansion review for Manufactions. So for me, I didn't like the contractors, but I didn't like the contractors before. So I just really didn't like the contractors.
Yeah, because that is what it's really kind of emphasizing here.
Yeah, I found like I said, the few blueprints that because there's icons, thankfully, in the lower left or lower right, I can't remember. There's icons on the cards that indicate which expansion they're from. And the ones I identified from Subterfuge were perfectly fine. In fact, I liked some of the new mechanics. Just like tweaks to things. So they really came up with some new good content in there.
Yeah.
I just don't like the concept of the negative player interaction. So I think for me, I would be hesitant to play with it at a higher player count. But on the other hand, I'd also give it a try just to see. Maybe it's, depending on the people we play it with, it's no big deal.
Yeah. So recommendations?
Yeah. What I was trying to. Yes.
So 2 players.
Yes. So for conclusion, for 2 players, honestly, this might not be necessary, but on the other hand, it could be fine too.
So you're a maybe?
Yeah, I think for this one really is, it's going to depend on how, in a 2-player, whoever the 2 players are, how they interact. If one person really doesn't like negative player interaction and the other one really does, it could feel bad if the one who really loves the negative player interaction uses it on the one who doesn't. So that could be bad. But if you both like to be competitive or you both just don't, it could be fine too, because like I said, the blueprints do offer new things. The other thing is, if there's certain contractors you don't like, you could just take them out. Like I said, in 2-player experience, we hardly ever go through, I don't know, more than 8 or 10 contractors.
That's being generous.
And that's being generous. And the deck is bigger than that. So you could take out that stealing, all the stealing and all these sabotage contractors and play with all the rest of them and the blueprints, and you'd be fine. So I can't fully say yes and I can't fully say no for someone playing this at a 2-player experience to get or not get Subterfuge.
For me, I'd actually say no. 2-player wise, even if you're a competitive person and want to see this, because of how big the decks are, I think it dilutes that to the point where you're only randomly seeing that bit of interaction pop up.
That's true.
It doesn't really feel like it can give you solidly that experience of direct head-to-head competition. The only people I would even say this is for are the completionists, like ourselves. We just buy everything.
Yeah.
And as you can see, Sarah's just willing to, I'm going to just take this part out and play with this part, and that's fine. It doesn't change the effectiveness of the game.
Right.
This is almost more game for more game's sake, and they just needed some more design space, and they said, well, what if some of these had negative interactions? Throw that in. I think you'll barely even notice they're there.
Right. And that's why I like I said, I lean towards Will's no. For a 2-player experience, unless you're completionists like we are, probably don't get this. I think this could shine at higher player counts.
Yes.
I would, more
But
cards.
we're doing a recommendation
I know.
for
I'm sorry.
2 players.
2 players. Or no.
Yeah.
No.
I go with no.
Okay.
Accessibility-wise.
It's perfectly fine. I mean, there's only these new rectangular. I mean, they're so different from any other token in the game. So you're not going to have any issues with that.
All right, so ready for ratings?
Yes.
So let me start with me.
Okay.
So for the base game, I gave it a 3. When you got to manufactions, it went up to 4. With Subterfuge, back down to a 3. This is more of the same, but it's highlighting elements that I wasn't thrilled with in the base game. So it's like shining up the worst part of it, and I'm still not blown away by it, and I'm less blown away by it now that it has a little bit more of a kick. And as you could see in a 2-player experience, I'd probably even suggest not picking it up. So it's lucky that it's staying at a 3 and not going down to a 2. But it's still a solid game through and through. Like I said, it just feels like more of the same. It just didn't feel like it added like the other expansion did for me.
All right, so I gave the base a 4. And with the manufactions expansion, I actually upped it to a 5. And as much as I said this expansion could work, especially if you take some things out, if I would have to play with everything, I mean, like,
just because you don't want to take it apart?
Yeah, just because I don't want to take it apart. It actually goes down to a 3 for me.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's just, it adds elements I just don't even want to think about in this game. Like I said, if I could manipulate it and take out the negative contractors and make sure none of the blueprints, I mean, like you said, I don't think any of the blueprints could have negative stuff because of the timing aspect of everybody doing the simultaneous at the same time, because that's what simultaneous means. Yeah, I just don't like it. I don't like it as a concept, even though the times we played it, it didn't have a big impact because we were playing with everything. I would just kind of rather not have it in the box.
Yeah. So 6 out of 12. It's still the middle of the road.
Yes.
It's a good gateway game, even if you throw in this expansion.
Yeah.
But I don't think it enhances the game.
Not for us, because again, we typically don't like negative player interaction. Actually, in most games, but definitely not in engine building. I mean, if you're working on something and all of a sudden somebody slams down a sabotage token and you can't use it. I mean, we didn't experience it, but the concept of this is threateningly there, it just kind of puts a cloud over everything.
Yeah, we always balk at any sort of mechanism that comes along and says, hey, stop playing this portion of the game.
Yeah.
And there are ways to move that token off. It's just extra effort. It's just putting in effort for a mechanism that is essentially telling you stop playing.
Right. Especially when, like we've talked about, the economy is already so tight in this game. You don't have the time, the resources, the opportunity. I mean, you can make it, but to have to then deal with it just so you can use something again. Yeah, not good. I mean, in our book.
Right. So that will do it for us here at Rolling with More. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach us on the various social media platforms at
Rolling with 2, that's TWO. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And on YouTube, please like and subscribe.
And we're not rolling with less. We're rolling with more!